What's up, guys? In today's video, we're going to address some common problems with these Jeeps, especially right here. You can see Jeep 4.0 concerning underhood temperatures, overheating, hard starting, poor performance, engine runs rough. We're going to talk about heat soak, talk about vapor lock, and then I'm going to try and fix them and let you know if it works or not. So stick around.
Rage on that beat, going crazy.
Now, before I start installing parts and getting under the hood, I want to talk about why I'm doing this and what's happening with my Jeep specifically. So my Jeep, when I go off-roading, it runs great. Once it gets warm, gets hot on the trail, I shut it off a lot because we get to a hard obstacle and it takes a while for each person to get up. And then when I come back, I start it back up and it's hard to start and it feels like it's running on like 3 cylinders. It takes maybe 3 or 4 minutes for it to kind of work its way out, and then it runs fine again. I went on a quest to figure out exactly what's going on, why it's doing this, and I'm going to share it with you guys as I go along fixing it, and I'll let you know if it takes care of the problem or not. First off, heat soak. What is heat soak? Specifically, we're talking about injectors in this case because of the scenarios and what's happening with our fuel. But heat soak in general is basically the rise in the underhood temperatures or the temperatures in all your systems, cooling system, intake system, your oils, your injectors, the rise in those temperatures after you shut the engine off. In my scenario, that's exactly what's happening. It's so hot under the hood that the fuel is evaporating in the injectors and in the fuel line that's right by the fuel injectors and the fuel rail, everything, it's all evaporating. And when I go to start it back up, it doesn't want to start. It has to build that pressure back up. Another thing with these is the fuel pumps are notorious for the check valve in the fuel pump to go bad, causing the fuel to drain back into the tank. So that's 2 different things happening. So I think 1, the fuel is actually going back down to the tank where it's supposed to be held up there. And 2, it's evaporating in the fuel lines and the fuel injectors up here. So that's my 2 things that are going wrong in my opinion. So going back to high school science, the higher the pressure, the higher the temperature it takes for the gas to vaporize. It only takes 160 degrees to vaporize fuel at 4.79 psi. So 11.29 psi, it takes 200 degrees to vaporize that fuel. And at 15 psi, it's 213 degrees to vaporize that fuel. This is a fuel study that I read and did research on. It doesn't go above 213 degrees or 14 psi, but the TJ, the Jeep Wranglers, probably the XJs, and all the Jeeps that run the 4.0, the fuel line with the fuel injected system is 49.2 plus or minus 5 psi. So basically, as your pressure increases, your temperature that it takes to vaporize it increases as well. It's basic, which makes total sense. You shut it off, there's no longer pressure in that fuel line. The temperature it takes to vaporize it drops significantly. So the one thing that I did do is I just ran it in the garage at idle, let it warm up. So the header is usually could run over 1,000 degrees. So I temped it with my temp gun and it was like 700 degrees, just idling, not hot, running around on the trail under a load. And guess what's right next to the header? My fuel line bolts to the intake manifold, the bottom side of the intake manifold, and it's like 2 inches away from that 700 to 1,000 degree plus header. So we're going to do some things to fix that. So I'm going to stop talking and we're going to start putting some stuff on. I made this really easy for you guys. I put everything you need in our Amazon store. All you got to do is click the link in the description or from our website, the Amazon link, and everything you need is all in there, nice and easy for you guys to check out. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is installing this fuel rail and injector cover kit. So DEI Performance makes a kit that's going to put a heat shield over the intake to kind of separate the intake manifold and the exhaust, because they're literally both right next to each other, stacked on top of each other. It has covers for the fuel rail and the fuel injectors and a heat shield. So another thing that I'm going to add to it is I found in my toolbox this cover that I'm going to put over the fuel line that is literally 2 inches away from the exhaust. So I'm going to actually unbolt this from here and try and kind of spin the bracket around and move the fuel rail farther away from the exhaust manifold and then cover it with this. So first up, we got to take our intake off, take our bracket for our throttle cables, and take our fuel injectors off, making sure we're marking them so we don't get the connectors mixed up, and taking the fuel line off, and we'll pull the fuel rail off. You also need a fuel line disconnect tool. Now once you get the fuel rail down here on the bench, first thing you want to do is take all of the injectors out of the fuel rail. Once you get that done, you're going to want to take a pick, a pocket screwdriver, or just your fingers and just take off all of the O-rings on the injectors. Now my injectors had quite a bit of buildup around the tips of the injectors, so I just took my pick and scraped and cleaned all of that buildup off before I started putting it back together. Now it says to use Vaseline or dielectric grease on the O-rings so to help them go into their homes, probably because you don't want a certain oil-based type things on the rubber to eat the rubber away. So I have dielectric grease, although it is pretty expensive. I don't want to go in the house try and find Vaseline. So I did make a mistake here. I installed the injectors in the fuel rail before I installed the reflective heat covering on it, so luckily it was much easier to take them out than it was before. Olight is the maker of high quality flashlights. I've been using them for a while now. They're super awesome. Make sure you click the link in the description and use the code MuddyBeards4x4 to get yourself 10% off your purchase. There's so much buildup inside where these injectors seat. I need to clean it up. It's pretty bad. So what I'm doing is I don't want it to fall into a combustion chamber as little as possible. It's going to happen, but I'm just going to use my pick and a vacuum, my shop vac, and scrape it out. Get kind of the big chunks and everything. It is vacuuming up, not falling into there. I'm going to go down all of these, and then I'll go in with a rag, brake clean rag, and clean up the inside where the O-ring is going to seat. Then we got all these little baby heat shield wrap guys that will wrap around all the injectors. So there it is, all done, wrapped up. Everything is bolted back together. I'm going to start up here in a second. I wanted to show you my fuel line down here. I was able to flip this bracket around and that's given me about 3 inches farther away from the header, and it's covered with this heat wrapping. The one thing I did have to do when I bolted this up here is I had to put a little bit of a bend in it so it doesn't hit my steering shaft. But that's not a big deal, so I like that a lot better. Okay guys, so you might be able to tell by the beard that it has now actually been 4 months since I installed this, recorded this video, and I can actually tell you in the 4 months over the summer that this actually works. It is worth the money to spend on this if you are having this problem. It totally fixed my problem. No more hard starts when it's hot, no more running rough when it's hot after a restart. Works amazing. So if you guys like the videos we are making here on Muddy Beards 4x4, make sure you check out our website. The link's in the description. Our Amazon store where you can get all of the parts that I installed on this exact project. You can get some shirts, stickers, whatnot. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you are not already. And until next time, we will see you on the trail.
Rage on that beat, going crazy.